in Ring and Women of Honor, of course, but the match that you guys had, it was, I mean, do you feel like you have to be a fan of catch wrestling, of jiu-jitsu to appreciate Bloodsport, or do you think there's a possibility for more of a crossover from the quote-unquote casual fan?
I mean, I feel like, so it's kind of iffy, all right? Because, like, I've had fans of pro wrestling tell me that they specifically watched Bloodsport because of my match, and they enjoyed the whole show. Like, my mom and dad, actually, they went to Atlantic City to go support me. And my mom and dad, like, they're huge pro wrestling fans. And to actually get them up there to watch Bloodsport, I was like, I kind of tried to explain to them a little bit about it, like, beforehand, because, like, I didn't want my parents to, like, freak out, you know, like, because they had never seen anything quite, like, that brutal, or they've never seen me do anything quite that brutal before. So I kind of, like, try to give them a heads up, but, like, you know what? Like, my parents absolutely loved that show.
That's awesome.
And, like,
yeah,
they ate it up, hook, line, and sinker. Like, they were just like, holy crap, what did we just come here to witness, you know?
Yeah, because it's not, I mean, it is pro wrestling. It kind of reminds me of the old, like, it's got the pancrase.
UWFI.
UWFI, yes, of course, yeah.
Yeah, UWFI, yeah.
Yeah, Little Guido from ECW was used to wrestle. His such good stuff, the Sicilian Shooter. But yeah, it's got that, you know, a realistic, a gritty feel to it. And I think whoever put that show, I know it was Josh Barnett's Bloodsport, but whoever booked that show and the talent on that show, like, it could not have been any better. The Minowa Man versus Timothy Thatcher. I mean, just all the guys.
Oh my God.
Hard. And AK, Sienna. I know there's been a lot of talk on Twitter. A lot of people want to see you versus Allison Kay at the next Bloodsport. Is that something? Is there a Twitter campaign? Do we hashtag something? How do we make that happen?
I have no idea how to make it happen, but literally, like, that night after it was all said and done, I was, like, talking to Josh, because Josh is the one that booked it all, and I was like, hey, I really, really want, like, another opportunity to do this, and he was like, oh, we'll see if that can happen or whatever, and then, like, I go, I want to fight her, and I went into AK, because, like, I love AK. I love her so much, and I would love to just, like, put on a clinic with her. Like, I know she's super, super badass, so I feel like if there's anybody that I really want to do that with, it would be her, because, like, I already had, like, the opportunity of a lifetime to wrestle Sumi on that stage. Like, I would just love to wrestle AK.
Yeah, so it sounds like Josh Barnett is the person that we will send our very well-spirited tweets towards in regards to his next Bloodsport show. But, you know, if
for sure. And then
go ahead, sorry.
Game Changer Wrestling, too. Brett Lauderdale.
Gotcha. So we'll make sure to get
they're the ones that put it on.
That campaign going on tomorrow. So you said your parents were big fans of pro wrestling. Were they fans of pro wrestling before you made that your career, or is that something they, you know, learned to love?
So, like, my dad and I would watch pro wrestling when I was younger, and, like, that's what he's originally, like, who I, like, got the pro wrestling bug from with my dad, because, like, we would raise our eyebrows at each other, and he would, like, imitate The Rock, and, you know, like, it was just, like, one of those, like, childhood things that you just do with your parents, you know, and, slowly, like, it evolved, and then, like, I moved out, and I started tattooing and stuff like that, and, kind of, like, dissipated into the background for a little bit, and then, whenever I started wrestling again, my mom, or whenever I started pro wrestling, whenever I started bringing pro wrestling, like, back into the conversations and stuff, my mom was like, are you sure this is, like, what you want to do? You know, 'cause she was worried about me getting hurt and everything. And then she came to one of my matches. And as soon as my mom came to one of my matches, like, they had never seen me compete in, like, jiu-jitsu or anything like that. So, like, they didn't really, like, know how skilled I am and like how athletic I am. And so like they came to one of my matches, and honestly, like they didn't become really big fans of pro wrestling, like super big fans of pro wrestling until I started dating Shannon.
Get out of here!
And
really?
Shannon, and like Shannon has like converted my parents into like the biggest pro wrestling fans, and like I don't think that I could have done it by myself, like alone, you know, like.
Sure. I mean, listen, there's one thing to get the approval of the parents. There's a whole nother thing to turn them into diehard pro wrestling fans.
Yeah, my mom is like constantly like sharing all of my Facebook stuff, you know, and like she just retired, but she was a registered nurse, right? So like she's friends with like all these doctors and stuff on her Facebook, and like she's sharing pictures of me like making people bleed in Puerto Rico and stuff. And she's just like, yeah, that's my girl.
That's my daughter. Oh man.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So you and your father grew up watching wrestling. So I'm going to ask you the toughest question that we have. It's a question that we ask every single person that comes on the show. It is the question that divides the All Night Long Wrestling podcast right down the middle. Right now, if you had to choose one all time, would it be Shawn Michaels or would it be Bret Hart? You only get to choose one.
Shawn Michaels.
Well, that makes me 3-60 or so on this debate here. It seems like everybody in the world is Team Shawn Michaels. I will go back to my cave now, but that's just one of the things that really breaks up the band here. But so you were more, I guess, growing up like watching Shawn, the aerial stuff, the promos, the Attitude Era kind of deal. That's really what drew you in for Shawn.
Yeah, but honestly, like I love Shawn, don't get me wrong, but like Eddie and Chris Benoit were like my ultimate favorites.
Absolutely. Were you watching ECW, or was this like once they came to WWE kind of time?
ECW, and like even before ECW, when Chris was in Japan.
Oh, absolutely. And the Super J Cup back in the day, yeah. So ECW, I mean, and then when they became the New Radicals, I feel like they were able to bridge the gap between the hard-hitting, almost kind of Super Juniors, but like they had enough size to make it, you know, it look very believable with the heavyweights. And I feel like without the Eddie, the Chris Benoit, the Chris Jericho kind of era, there wouldn't be as much of an acceptance today, if that makes sense.
I agree. I also feel like today, like the guys just aren't as big as they were.
No, because it's more realistic. If you're watching MMA, would you rather watch a heavyweight fight, or would you rather watch like a Joe Benavidez, Henry Cejudo? I just feel like the talent, not necessarily the talent, but maybe the speed is really in the lower weight classes. When you had guys like Hercules and the Barbarian, they definitely had their spot. But if you're looking for raw talent and wrestling in a professional wrestling match, I don't think those big juiced up guys are really what people are looking for anymore.
Yeah, so I actually came up watching Pride, and that was my favorite fighting championship. It was Pride because of the guys like Fedor and Don Fry and Takayama.
Vanderlei Silva.
Yes, I love seeing big dudes just mess each other up that. I love that.
Well, I mean, Pride.
And then big dudes that can move too.
Yeah, Kevin Randleman was it the Monster Randleman?
Yeah,
the best. I'm so glad you said that. The heavyweight Grand Prix. You had Nogueira, Sergey Haritonov, and also the rule set.
Yeah, Big Nog.
So big. Yeah. The rule set was so much better.
Mm-hmm.
Then the
new kicks were legal.
Yep, stops. You couldn't just dive it. You couldn't do an ankle pick from 40 feet away and not get punted in the head. Vanderlei Silva, Shogun, Ninja. Yes, those are the days of MMA. Do you still keep up with MMA? Do you still watch it?
I do occasionally because a lot of my friends fight MMA. So I'm still watching Bellator and stuff like that. But actually, a friend of mine, she just made her UFC debut not too long ago, but it was on FS1, so I don't think a lot of people got to see it. But yeah, I'm still keeping up with it. it's just not as interesting to me as pro wrestling is right now. As weird as that sounds, like I still follow it, you know, and like there's still like a couple of fighters that like I really dig.
I'm sorry. I'm so glad you just said that. We actually just interviewed Anthony Gutierrez about like 3 hours ago, and he, 12-3 MMA record, and he's a big MMA fan. But he kind of said the same thing. Like MMA was such a big thing for so long, but the interest in MMA kind of dwindled down, and pro wrestling. I don't want to say it's become cool again, but it's almost become like the in thing now, right? I think pro wrestling has grown so much, and I don't want to disrespect anybody in saying like in regards to the UFC, but I feel like in the UFC, like it's become very watered down, and there haven't been maybe those personalities that there were maybe 10 years ago, or the level of fighting that you would see in Pride back in the day when they had like the Grand Prix and things like that. It just hasn't been as like interesting.
Sakuraba, like they have the characters. The characters are what sells tickets. Like you don't have the Chael Sonnens right now, you know what I'm saying? Yeah. Like people that could cut promos, like you don't have that right now in the UFC. So that why is there an interest to watch a fight? Like there's like, as much as people want to hate on pro wrestling and storylines and whatnot, like at least there's a reason why these dudes are fighting or these chicks are fighting, you know, like there's beef or whatever. Like
yeah, you're emotionally invested in something. Like when I remember Chuck versus Tito, the first Chuck versus Tito fight, I was literally glued to my television because it was such a long quote unquote feud. It had so much, I was so invested in both of those guys as individuals. I was like, I can't wait to see what happens. And now, like, there's just, I feel like the biggest star in the UFC is Dana White. And that shouldn't be, you know?
Right?
Yeah.
Dude, you're so on point with that.
I grew up when I was first watching MMA. My favorite fighter was Phil Baroni, the New York Badass. That dude could talk me into anything. It's the ability to cut a promo.
Yes. So I loved Don Fry.
Oh, yeah. When he wrestled Ken Shamrock, the pre-fight for that was amazing. It was like, oh man, these two dudes are they're going to kill each other. You know, it's like I'm so. Mm-hmm. And there's nothing to that. I mean, there's the Conor McGregor, and I get that, and everybody loves Conor McGregor. Was never a huge fan of Conor McGregor. I mean, just that I feel like the legends of the sport too. Like all with due respect to Fedor, he's still fighting, but you know, is a victory over Fedor now? Does it really mean much?
It doesn't mean the same. No, it doesn't. I remember when you're fighting.
When Verdum submitted him, it was like, okay, he was still undefeated. That was huge. But since then, I mean, it's tough to see the people that, like, you know, you idolize getting older, right? And, like, not being who they were. Like, Vanderlei Silva is fighting Mark Hunt bare knuckle. I don't know if you heard that.
I have not heard that, and that is crazy as hell.
Yeah, like, that shouldn't be.
Why would you do that?
He's like 46, 47. He's been in. I'll watch him fight forever. Don't get me wrong, but I feel like it's just those personalities. The guy was called the Axe Murderer. Like I had to tune in when he was fighting, and now you have the Ultimate Fighter season 405, and it's like the same stuff over and over again. But that's why pro wrestling,
it's the same program.
Exactly, and there's nothing that and when. Not to go off on a UFC tangent, but when they made everybody become sponsored by Reebok, there was no individuality. Everybody was wearing the exact same tracksuit, the exact same jumpsuit. It was like, I'm just looking at, I'm like watching a video game and like watching the same people fight. But I think that's why, taking it back to pro wrestling now with the social media and all these other avenues of getting content across, the individuality is now more than ever, and you could really show who you are through YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, social media, and people are able to get such a vested interest in you that they're able to follow you now, wrestle in all these different places. And I think it's probably the best time to be a fan of professional wrestling.
I agree. And there's also like that little bit of like where the fans can actually see like into the life of a pro wrestler, and they kind of they get to live vicariously through you, like seeing what you're doing and like keeping up with you. Because like I have people that like legit like follow what I do.